everybody, and good morning. Today, I'm going to give you a program update on our cnMatrix TX2K family of tower switches. My name is John Mead. I joined Cambium Networks about 3.5 years ago. It seems like a half a year. It's gone by so fast. But anyway, I came on board to introduce Ethernet switching to the company, and we're now shipping products. We've been shipping for about 2 years. And upcoming very soon, we're going to be releasing a new family of switches, and these are the tower switches. So today I'm going to cover a few things. So in addition to the tower switches, I'm going to start off with some highlights of 2020. I'll go really quickly through that, give a quick portfolio overview, and then I'll jump into the TX2K family of switches, give a product introduction, talk about our software strategy that we're using. And then the bulk of the presentation will be kind of this technical overview of what the capabilities, features, and functionality are of this TX2K switch family. And then, of course, we'll follow it up with Q&A. The Q&A, we can go as long as you want. If you guys want follow-up meetings, we can schedule those as well. Okay, here we go. I'm assuming you guys can see my screen okay. So 2020 was a really big year for us. We released a lot of new hardware platforms, and with each platform release, we always release new software features as well. But some of the highlights for 2020 is back in the April timeframe, we released our 48 port switches. We have 3 versions of them. We released a multi-gig switch, so 2.5 gig of bandwidth per port for deployments of Wi-Fi 6 is where it makes a lot of sense. We also released, we've always supported cnMaestro, but we released it with some big enhancements. So we have a very nice GUI interface right now. And it makes it very easy to use, especially when you're using cnPilot as well. So to manage a wired and wireless deployment with cnMaestro is very nice. What came with this new GUI interface is our virtual stacking support as well. Next, kind of a new series of our enterprise switches. So this is the Enterprise 1K family. A few less features, very aggressively priced. We also added in cloud support for XMS. So XMS can now manage our cnMatrix line of products as well. And this is one everyone kind of forgets about, but since about the April timeframe, we've been shipping Cambium branded transceivers. So all of our switches have either SFP, most of them have SFP plus fiber uplink ports. Well, you need SFP or SFP plus modules or transceivers to plug into those ports. And you can buy them anywhere, and our switches will work with any transceivers that you buy. But they work with Cambium branded transceivers as well. And these Cambium branded transceivers are standard, so you can plug them into our switches or you can plug them into other switches as well. PBA is a really big feature for us. When it comes to Ethernet switching, it's a pretty mature market out there. PBA is a real differentiator for us. It's a very useful and practical feature. Getting a lot of traction with PBA with customers, but also with analysts as well. So we continue to expand and enhance our PBA offering. So that's 2020. What we're talking about today is 2021, and mainly the first 6 months. So we are releasing this TX2K family of switches. So there's 3 switches that I'm going to be talking about today. Portfolio overview. So where are we today? So we have an enterprise access switch portfolio, which we've been shipping for a while. And now we're talking about these new WISP tower switches. Now the switches aren't the same. They can't be the same. If we try to build one switch for both, we'd have to make too many compromises. So these switch families are purpose-built for these target deployment applications. And I'll talk more about what the differences are. But the important thing is cnMaestro and XMS do, from a cloud management point of view, will support both of these. So quick overview of our enterprise switches. We shipped our first 4 switches about just a little over 2 years ago. So we've been shipping for 2 years. Earlier in 2020, we released the 48 port and multi-gig switches I mentioned to you. Over the summer in June, we released the 24 port versions of our 1K portfolio. And then in August of 2020, we released our 8 port versions of our 1K portfolio. Now here comes the WISP switch. So we're going to be shipping these in Q1 and Q2. And this is what I'm really going to spend the rest of today talking about. These 3 WISP switches, but more specifically, the one in the middle there, the TX2020, that's the switch that comes out first. I'll go over the schedule with you guys in a few slides. Okay, here's the TX2K. So what are we doing? So this is a new family of switches, purpose-built for WISP tower deployments. It's a nice little picture there at the bottom. This point here, I'm going to be kind of coming back to this point quite a bit today. So it's a fully integrated solution, and you can't really find this out there. So what does this switch give you? Well, it gives you a non-blocking switching architecture that supports L2 and L3 switching. So it's a full-blown switch, just like our enterprise switches. But on top of that, it also has the Cambium sync that you need for connecting the Cambium radios, or you can connect any radio out there to it. And it also has PUE. Now, PUE, I'll talk a lot about that today. It's not just the standards-based PUE that we do support on our enterprise switches, but we do support standards-based also on these WISP switches, which is kind of unique in the industry. But we also support the low voltage passive PUE. We also support the 54 volt high power PUE up to 90 watts. So I'll be talking about that more today. So with these WISP switches, it really will simplify the deployment and just your daily operations with these switches and with activity you're doing on the tower. With our enterprise switches today and with these WISP switches, we support our PVA feature, which does automate the configuration, not only the initial configuration when you initially deploy the switch, but it also automates the configuration necessary when you connect a device into your switch. And I'll be talking about that. But you connect in a 450M radio, you plug it in. We automate most, or if not all, of the configuration necessary when you do connect in that radio. Highly secure. So when you do connect a device into your switch, we're constantly monitoring when a new device is added. We gather as much information about that device as we can. We profile that device, and if there is a match to any policy that's been set up, we will automatically enforce that policy, which could include segmenting that device onto the correct network, the correct VLAN or the correct subnet. Fully manageable, right? So 100% comprehensive COI, a very easy to use web GUI. But also we support, and which we promote most, is our cnMatrix cloud management. So at this point in time, XMS will not work with these WISP switches, but cnMatrix does right out the door. Okay, a little bit more on this integrated solution comment. So a completely integrated solution. So first, PUE, intelligent and flexible. We put a lot of work into our PUE. We always have on our enterprise switches, and we continue to do so here on the WISP switches. Now, what's unique on the WISP switches is that we support not only the standards-based 802.3 AFAT-BT, but we also support a lot of the PUE requirements that are in the WISP industry today, that are used in the WISP industry today. So 24 volt passive PUE, high power 4-pair PUE, which gives you up to 90 watts. So based on this PUE, and I'm going to be a little bit repetitive on this, I'll talk more about it later, but you can plug in almost any device you have, and we're going to be able to power it up. If the device can be powered up with PUE, 99.9% of the time, our switch will be able to power it up. I can't think of any device out there that you can't plug in. Okay, Cambium Sync. So we do have Cambium Sync out on this switch. So any radio that requires that, we got it. And we have Cambium Sync on all 16 ports. I'll cover those details later. We do have two sources for this GPS signal, an external antenna as well as a cnPulse device. More details on that to follow. Switching. Okay, so you get the Cambium Sync, you get the PoE, but you also get a enterprise grade non-blocking layer 2 and layer 3 enterprise feature set. So we greatly leverage our existing enterprise switches, and so all the features you see there, you get those plus some more that we've added for these WISP switches. Maybe one of the biggest points of this switch, this is the TX2020 that I'm showing below. On the TX2020, we have two removable power supplies. So these power supplies, I'm going to list them out for you later, but we have AC versions and DC versions. And they just slide right in, slide right out. I don't know if you can tell the picture, but very easy to remove and replace. Definitely field replaceable. So a little bit of an exaggeration, but a wiring closet or a hut or shack or enclosure where you're going to install this equipment, it's so easy for that to get out of control with just so many different devices and so many wires everywhere. Keeping the deployment simple makes it so much easier to troubleshoot and maintain. But a typical deployment, you're going to have many different power injectors. You're going to have a few different timing synchronization devices. You'll have one or more L2 or L3 switches. And it really results in this picture here. It's kind of a rat's nest of power cords and cabling. We've all seen this, right? What this new switch, this TX2K switch will do for you is it's kind of one box that does it all, right? It's that L2 switch, it's the power, it's the Cambium Sync, and it really should simplify your deployments quite a bit. Okay, where are we on the schedule of things? So today, here we are, we just released 3.2.1. It's a software-only release, some miscellaneous enhancements, addressed a couple customer issues, and this software has been shipping for a little over 2 years now. And that's where we are today. What's coming next? Well, it's this WISP family, right? So in March, we will be shipping in volume the first of the 3 switches. It's the 16-port switch known as the TX2020. So the 20 means there's 20 ports. So it's 16 access ports plus 4 10 gig fiber optic. Anyway, these TX2020 ships in the March timeframe. We also have some software features along with it. The 8-port version is what's coming out next. That's going to be in the early May timeframe. And this is, everything's the same, except there's 8 access ports instead of 16. And then we have a 24-port version, which is coming out in the later June timeframe. Also, same functionality, same features, it's just 24 ports instead of 8 or instead of 16. So this is the timeline. In the first 6 months, we will be shipping all 3. In the first 6 months of 2021, we'll be shipping all 3 of these switches. Okay, a little bit about the software strategy. This slide applies to our enterprise switches as well as our WISP switches. So just real quick about the functionality. So first thing to note, and the one thing to take away is these are enterprise grade switches, full layer 2 feature set, layer 3 feature set, not just static routes, but dynamic routing as well. Extensive ACLs and filters and QoS capabilities, long list of security features. So enterprise grade switching, fully managed, CLI web, web GUI, SNMP as well. From a network management system point of view, we support cnMatrix, cnMatrix for both enterprise and WISP, which is we support XMS for our enterprise family. And also, those both work either in the cloud or on premise, so fully managed. Uplinks. I do need to point this out. So 10 gig SFP plus fiber uplinks on our switches. Just, a lot of switches out there in the industry only have 1 gig uplink, so be aware of that. We do have 4 uplink ports, and some switches in the industry have 2. So depending on what you're going to use those fiber uplinks for, you need to think about this. So PUE, I've talked about before, standards-based PUE. I need to emphasize that. There's a lot of switches out there, especially in the WISP deployment industry, that do not support standards PUE. It's all passive. Standards PUE does have several advantages related to it. Some devices can only take passive PUE, so we do support passive PUE as well. Now about the PUE, we have lots of control over the PUE. We can enable it or disable it on a per port basis. So full per port control. We can tell you exactly how much power is being drawn at any instant in time on a per port basis. We have the ability to toggle the power on a port. You don't have to manually power it off and then manually power it on. You just hit a toggle button. Very, very nice for maintenance purposes. Stats are available on a per port as well. Advanced features. I mentioned PBA, and normally I could do an entire webinar just on PBA or an entire half-day session just on PBA, but policy-based automation, I have one little summary slide on it coming up. Also layer 3 support, I've mentioned it already, not just static routes, but static and dynamic, and the Cambium sync for the WISP switches. So a true zero-touch experience. Let me talk about this for a second. We spend a lot of time on ease of use for these switches. So we want to make it easy for you to deploy these switches, easy to maintain them, easy to configure them, and easy to troubleshoot them. And it's not really about troubleshooting the switch. It's more about troubleshooting whatever problems you might be having. It might appear to be on the switch, but it's actually on one of the devices or vice versa, but just things to help you troubleshoot. So ease of use is a big theme of ours, and we put a lot of energy into this. One example is our PBA. Anyway, all these features I'm talking about, they come with the base price of the switch. It also comes with a limited lifetime warranty. With our enterprise switches, you get a 5-year warranty. With these WISP switches, you get a 3-year warranty. But anyway, if you include all these features, if you include the lifetime warranty, if you think about the Cambium support, which is top-notch that you get, it really is best-in-class TCO. Very nice solution. All right, one more slide on software strategy. So I want to emphasize that this is one code base for both the enterprise switches and the WISP switches. So this code has been in existence for 3 years. It's been shipping for 2 years. It's not like if you buy one of these WISP switches, it's not like you're getting a 1.0 software release for the first time. The software has been tested at customer sites for over 2 years. With each one of these releases, we always talk about we have this new hardware, new platform. So for every one of these releases, we always add new functionality, new software features. A few that I'm going to highlight for you here. We have a really cool feature that I'm excited about. It wasn't my idea. It came in from the field. Anyway, auto recovery of connected devices. So we have a feature that constantly monitors a device. And if you've enabled this feature, and if we detect that device is no longer responding, we will toggle the power to that device, which resets that device and brings it back to life. So we'll do that automatically without user intervention. Another feature that we've added, it's not a new exciting feature. There's switches out there that do this today, but cable diagnostics, using TDR, we will test the quality of the actual cable, identify shorts and opens. CLI override, CLI snippets, getting into a little bit of details here on the cloud management solutions. And then of course, a bunch of PBA enhancements as well. All right. PBA, policy-based automation. One quick slide. After this, we're going to start doing a deep dive on our on the TX switches. Okay, so what is PBA that I keep talking about? This might be a repeat for a lot of you, but I can't resist talking about it. So just one slide. So what does PBA do for you? It automates the adds, moves, and changes of network devices, right? You plug in a device into any port of any switch in your network, and it will automatically configure that switch and the port that you've plugged that device into. It eliminates the error-prone and time-consuming manual configuration. So because of this, because it's all automated, you know you're getting the configuration right. So it simplifies and significantly reduces troubleshooting. Every port is treated equal. So with PBA, you can plug this device, let's say it's a 450i. You can plug this device into any port of the switch. We will automatically detect it and automatically configure it appropriately. Enhances security by auto-segmenting the device. So when you plug it in, the auto configuration will automatically put it on the correct VLAN. It won't accidentally be put on the wrong VLAN, which might have access to, sensitive financial information, something like that. Reduces, so just summary here. What does it do? It reduces the expenses required to deploy and manage your network. All right, here's the TX2K. A little bit of a deep dive on the technical details. I am going to be a little bit repetitive because all these different PoE modes gets a bit confusing, but bear with me for a few slides here. So a quick strategy. So our strategy here is to develop 3 switches, an 8-port, a 16-port, and a 24-port. So when I say 8 ports, I'm talking about the access ports, the 1 gig access ports. There's also 10 gig fiber uplink ports. So when I say 8, it's actually 12 ports. When I say 16, it's actually 20 ports. These switches use a removable power supply, and these are called CRPS units. It's an industry standard form factor. So this power supply, there's a picture of it here. They just easily slide into the front of the switch. And we sell 6 of these CRPS supplies. I'll list them all out in detail later. The 16 port is unique. It takes 2 of these power supplies. It doesn't need 2. You can plug in one and we have a nice little cover that snaps in over the other. So it's fully functional with just 1 supply. The reason for 2 supplies is for redundancy purposes. So if you plug in 2, if one of the power supplies fails, nothing changes. Your switch continues to run. You will get a notification. You will get an event that one of your power supplies has failed, and then you can, at your convenience, you can swap out that power supply for a new one. Probably the most popular question I get is, do we support negative 48 volts? Yes. So these power supplies are fully isolated, and we will support positive or negative input polarity. And I've talked about this before, but the architecture, both the hardware architecture, is leveraged from our enterprise switches. Of course, we have extra stuff in there for Cambium Sync and the extra PoE and the removable power supplies, but we leverage a lot of that from our enterprise switches. And the software, for sure. It is the same software as I've mentioned. The extended temperature range on these switches, also a difference as compared to our enterprise switches. So the temperature range, minus 10 C up to 65 C. Warranty, 3 years. So high level strategy of the 3 switches. Let's dive a little bit deeper on the Ethernet connectivity. So I told you that we have 3 switches, 8 access ports, 16 access ports, or 24 access ports. But what's unique here on the 24 port switch, those 24 access ports are made up of 16 RJ45 copper ports and 8 1 gig SFP ports. So you get some fiber connectivity in there as well. Now, in addition to these 8, 16, and 24 access ports, you also get 4 10 gig SFP plus fiber uplink ports. All right, jumping into some of the additional functionality. Cambium Sync. So which ports provide Cambium Sync to your devices? Well, Cambium Sync is something that's used on copper connections, not fiber connections. But we do support Cambium Sync on all of our copper ports. So on the 8-port switch, it's all 8 ports. On the 16-port switch, it's all 16 ports. From a PUE point of view, let me emphasize again, we support standards-based PUE in addition to the other PUE modes, but we do support standards-based PUE. And more devices are using standards-based PUE. And there's a lot of safety associated with it, right? You have to, within the standard, you have to go through a detection mode and finally connecting and finally delivering the power. So when possible, we use 802.3. And we do support 802.3, so we have a PUE controller on every single port. In addition to, so with the standards-based PUE, for the overall switch, how much power do we have? How many devices can you plug up? And depending on how much power each device plugs, what's our overall power budget? So it depends on the CRPS or the power supply that you've chosen to use, but anywhere from 400 watts up to 1,000 watts that you can share across the ports of the switch. On the 16-port switch, it's double that if you use 2 power supplies. And again, with these PUE, full control and monitoring on a per port basis, as I mentioned earlier. So that's 802.3. Now, what else do you get on these switches? So on half of the ports, so on the 8-port switch, 4 of the ports, you get 4-pair PUE. With 4-pair PUE, you can provide up to 90 watts. So we support up to 90 watts of power on each of these, on half the ports of the switch. That 90 watts can be delivered using 802.3 BT, so standards based, or it can be delivered just with a passive 54 volts as well. Okay, on the other half of the ports, we support 802.3, right? 802.3 on everything, but we also support low voltage passive PUE on this second half of the ports. So 24 volt passive PUE up to 15 watts per port. All right, so this is kind of a summary of everything I've said. This is an example using our 16-port switch. This is the TX2020. This is the switch that starts shipping in the March timeframe. Okay, so let's start. So what do we have on this switch? Well, on the left side, you have your very typical console port, a serial connection. We also have a USB port for transferring files to and from the switch, config files, error files, the actual agent file itself. You can use USB for that if you'd like. You can also transfer those files over the network. Okay. These first 8 ports, so half of the ports, they're highlighted in green. These 8 ports support what? Well, they're 8 RJ45, and these are, 10, 100, 1000 megabit ports, so up to a gigabit of bandwidth on each of these ports. All 8 ports supports Cambium Sync, and from a PUE point of view, we do support 4-pair PUE on these ports, so that gives you 90 watts, up to 90 watts, depending on what your device needs. And you can deliver those 90 watts either using the standard 802.3 or passively using passive 54 volts. The second 8 ports, so what's the difference, right? The first 8 are coded in green, the second 8 are coded in purple or pink, whatever you want to call that color. So same thing, there are 8 RJ45, 10, 100, 1000 megabits per second, so up to a gigabit. All 8 supports Cambium Sync, just like the first 8 ports. It's the PUE that makes it a little bit different, right? So on these 8 ports, we use 2-pair PUE, which is what you see on most switches, right? And with 2-pair PUE, we can support standards-based 802.3 up to 30 watts per device, which is very typical. Probably 90% of devices out there use 30 watts or less. We can deliver that 30 watts passively as well. But on these 8 ports, we also support the passive 24 volts as well. So here are the differences between those two sections of ports. Okay, what else? What's next? So here, these 4 ports are the 10 gig fiber uplink ports, and these are SFP plus form factor. So you just plug in an industry standard SFP plus or SFP transceiver, and you're good to go. And again, Cambium Networks sells Cambium branded transceivers. What's next? Cambium Sync. So I didn't go into this in too much detail before, but we support 2 GPS sync sources. Okay, so that top gold copper connection there is for an external antenna. The RJ45 jack right below that, that is for Cambium CN pulse. Now you have your choice. You can use one or the other. Either one is fine. Or you can use both. If you use both, then that gives you redundancy. If one fails, we will use the other. Anyway, so GPS sync sources, you can use one or the other or both, giving you a little bit of redundancy. What's next? So this is a ground terminal on the front here. And what's next? The dual power supplies. So having 2 power supplies, we knew this would be a popular option, but everybody wants it. So this is a good thing, and it kind of redundancy kind of really shines out here. So you get the redundant GPS sources, you get the redundant power supplies, and again, let me emphasize, this switch, you don't need 2 power supplies. You only need 1. But if you want some redundancy, you can buy 2. And again, if I showed you a picture of the back of the box, there's nothing on the back of the box. It's empty. So everything is accessible on the front panel of the switch. Okay. Here are the CRPS power supplies. So what do they look like? There's a little picture there on the right. They just slide right in, and there's a nice little click that you hear when you slide it in. That's that little lever, green lever there on the front. You just pull that, you just push it to the side to release it, and that's how you slide it out. We have 6 of these CRPS supplies available. Again, these are industry standard form factors. They slide right in the front, very easy to replace. We have 3 AC versions. Something to note, the AC power cord is not included. You need to supply a separate AC cord if you have one, or of course you can buy one. We have part numbers for that as well. We also have 3 DC versions, and again, they're fully isolated, right? So this supports positive and negative input polarity. The DC cables are included, so these are 3-meter pigtail terminated connector cables. When you buy a switch, when you buy one of these TX switches, it does not come with a power supply. So you buy a switch, and then separately you buy a power supply as well. You can buy 1, you can buy 2, whatever you want to do. So let's talk a little bit more about the PoE power budget. So the PoE power budget depends on the CRPS type that you're going to use. I have some examples here. So here, these 4 rows represent the 1200 watt supply that we have, okay? So the total supply is 1200 watts. But how much do you get for PoE out? Well, it depends. It depends on if it's AC or DC. It also depends on the DC in voltage. And we accept a range from 36 volts all the way up to 72 volts. So depending on your DC in, that also dictates how much PoE power budget you will have. Let me talk about the term PoE power budget for a second. If you have a device that you connect into the switch, and that device can draw up to 30 watts, it doesn't mean that it is using 30 watts. It could use 30 watts under some peak conditions, but it might be only using 10, 15, 20. So at any point in time, you add up, how much power is being used on every port, and that's how much power you need. It's not the peak of every port, it's what's actually being drawn. So anyway, you can share this power across all the ports. Some 30-watt devices might only be pulling 10. So if you have eight of these 30-watt devices, that could be a maximum of 240, or it could be as little as 100. But anyway, so the PUE power budget is what you have available at any instant in time. I'm going to highlight a couple here. So these 1200-watt power supplies can actually provide more PUE budget than 960 watts. The reason why I have put 960 watts here, circled in red, is because that's the most that you can pull out of the switch. The first 8 ports can go up to 90 watts, right? So 8 times 90 is 720. The following 8 ports can only deliver 30 watts per port. So that's 8 times 30 or 240. So that's 960. So 960 is the most you can be pulling out of the switch at any one time. And that's why I put here in this chart 960. The power supplies actually have more power than that. Okay, let's talk about our other power supplies. These are the 930 watt supplies. That's the total power. But how much PUE load or how much power budget are you going to get? 840 watts for the AC version. For the DC version, you'll get 840 or 740, depending on what the DC in voltage is. Now, for the 600-watt supply, you're going to get 500 watts under any condition. Okay, so it's easy. Now, yeah, let's talk about this power budget. Let's talk about the 960 again. That is a lot of power. You know, in the first year of shipping this product, I don't think anyone will actually be using that much power. You'd have to have 8 450Ms plugged into the switch. That's 720 watts, and 8 devices plugged into the remaining ports, pulling 30 watts each. And that is just I don't know of any deployments today. Actually, I heard of one, but I don't know of any deployments today that actually has 8 450Ms on a single tower. But you could do it. It's working in our lab. You could do it. Okay, moving on. So this slide, what is this slide about? What I'm trying to say with this slide is you can connect any type of device you want into the switch. What does the switch do? Well, it's an Ethernet switch. It gives you Ethernet connectivity. But in addition to that, it has PUE, so it can power up the device if it needs it. And in addition to that, it has Cambium sync out. So if it's a radio that needs sync, you get it. So you can connect anything to this device. So from a PUE point of view, that's where it might get a little bit confusing. If the device can be powered up with PUE, you can power it up with this switch. But some devices don't get their power from PUE. Some devices get their power from a separate line card, AC or DC, maybe DC in. And you're on your own for those. We don't have DC out capabilities of this switch, although we're thinking about it for a future idea. But anyway, so if it takes PUE and if it needs Cambium sync, you can connect it. So Cambium sync, yes, we got it. Now with Cambium sync, you can disable it or enable it on a per port basis if necessary. With PUE, you've got all the options that I've been talking about today, and I'll just list them again. 802.3 on all ports, 54 volts passive up to 90 watts on ports 1 through 8, 54 volts passive up to 30 watts on ports 9 through 16, and then 24 volt passive on ports 9 through 16. So 24 volt passive is pretty popular out there, right? Cambium has devices that takes this low voltage passive PUE, and there's a lot of third-party devices that take this low voltage passive PUE as well, and we got it. So one quick example, a pretty high-end product from Cambium, the 5 gig 450M. Yes, you can plug it into the switch. It gets the sync that it needs, and it gets the 90 watts that it needs. And you can plug in more than one. You can plug in up to 8 on this TX 2020 switch. Okay, a little bit about temperature. So I said we support -10 up to 65. Yes, we do, but not under all conditions. There's a lot of details that are in the data sheet, but under most conditions. So under the most extreme conditions, the max temp could be 55, which is still what, 130 degrees Fahrenheit. But what does it depend on? It depends on the PUE load. It depends on the power supply type that you've chosen, AC or DC, and then it depends on the input voltage of the DC supplies. You can get all the details you need in our data sheet. Examples. So for 65 degrees, 1200 watt AC supply, if you're pulling less than 700 watts, that's a lot. You can go all the way up to 65 degrees. On the 930 supply, again, the AC version, if you're using less than 600 watts, you can go up to 65. And then on the 600 watt, if you use less than 450 watts of PUE load, you can go all the way up to 65 degrees. Here's some examples for 55 degrees, right? The DC supply is just a tad more sensitive to temperature than the AC supplies. But if you're using a DC supply and you have a PUE load greater than 700 watts, so that's kind of the worst scenario. Under that scenario, 55 degrees. And then similar for 930 and 600 watts. Now we do have a software feature that you can enable. You can put the switch into one of these into a high temperature, quote unquote, high temperature mode. If you put it in that mode, then it will put a maximum on the PUE load. So we won't let you use, like on the 1200 watt supply as an example, we won't let you use more than 700 watts if you turn on this feature. And that way, you're guaranteed to get the 65 degrees. Okay. And remember, 700 watts is a lot, right? You'd have to have a lot of devices to use more than 700 watts. Okay. This might be my last slide. This is a little bit about competitive analysis. So let me start by saying the competition out there, it's really not the same thing. All the devices out there are what is known as a mid-span device. So it's something that you put between your switch and your device. So that mid-span device, it's responsible for what? It's responsible for being a power injector, so it supplies power. That mid-span device also can supply Cambium sync. And so it's called a mid-span device because it goes in the middle between your switch and your device. But anyway, that's what I could find to compare against. So if you need passive 54 volts, if you need passive 24 volts, if you need Cambium sync, we have that on our TX family of switches. The competition also has it, so green. However, if you want redundant Cambium sync sources, right, we have that on our switch. The competition does not. If you want standard space PUE, we have it. The competition does not. A full-blown L2, L3 enterprise grade switch, that's what the TX family is. The competition is not. It's just a mid-span device. If you want fiber uplink ports, we have 4 10 gig uplinks. The competition does not. Fully managed, especially if you consider something as comprehensive as cnMatrix, we have it. The competition does not. An all-in-one solution, right? Fully integrated solution. That's what I've been talking about during this whole presentation. We have it. The competition does not. Dual redundant supplies. We have it. The competition, I should probably change that. I think one of the guys out there does have, well, it depends on how you look at it. You could consider it redundant, I guess. So anyway, maybe. Under the competition, I should change that to maybe. So we're offering a lot here. You can see all the green versus the red. So you might wonder about price. Depends on what you need, what the port configuration is, how big the power supply is, how many watts you want to be, what your PUE load is, that type of thing. But for this class of switch, it's a pretty high-end switch. You can, for all the 450Ms and so on and so forth. The price of our switch is actually less than, and in some cases a lot less than the competition. I did put in an example here. So this is a full solution with, I told you the power supplies are separate, right? So this price is with a power supply. It's a 600-watt supply. I think I picked the AC version. This is a list price. The competition, if you kind of skimp a little bit, you get close at $27.45. These are the online list prices that I found. And some of the competition, nice products, right? Nice products for what they do, but they're expensive. Up to $5,000, almost $6,000. So anyway, we've integrated everything together. And we were able to do it cost effectively with a feature-rich solution. So that kind of wraps up my presentation. I'm hoping this was useful for you. We'll do a Q&A now, but I would like to offer any follow-up questions. Just reach out to your local Cambium contact, and they'll set up a meeting with me, and we can go as deep as you'd like into any of these topics. Okay, let me go over to the Q&A here. Okay, I see some questions. We'll do a time check here. I don't even know what time it is. Oh yeah, so we got 10 minutes or so, but I can go long if you guys want to. So let me start out the slides. Okay, I will share the slides, but I can't do it yet. It's not a shipping product. So when do we start shipping? I said we're shipping volume in March. We're actually going to start shipping before that, but we'll hit volume in March, be able to meet demand in March. So at that point in time, I will share these slides. Next question, if I use the 450M with a camera attached, the question is, you cannot power that up. That is not true. A 450M plugging a camera into the auxiliary port will cause that 450M to potentially draw up to 90 watts, and we can power the full 90 watts. So you can plug anything you want into the auxiliary port, the 450M, and we can power it. I'm hoping I'm reading the question correctly. You can also plug the camera, a video surveillance camera, let's say. You can also plug that directly into our switch as well and power it up that way. So either way works fine. Okay, 820 and 850 radios, yes, you can power them on. We actually are in beta with this product now, and this is being, I think it's the 850. But yeah, so the 850 is on our list of being able to be powered up. But you know what, let me catch myself there. If the 850 takes PoE, meaning if it can be powered over Ethernet, then the answer is yes. And this is the same answer for any third-party device as well, right? So if it can power up over PoE, we can power it up. If it takes a separate power, like an AC cord or a DC input, then no, they have to supply their own power. But if it takes PoE, we will power it up. So what separates these switches from the other switches most WISPs already use? Well, there's a couple switches out there that are popular. One's a lower end switch, and it definitely can't provide this much PoE. On every one of their models except for one, they don't support the isolated power. You can't go -48. They definitely don't have the full-blown enterprise switching capability with the L2 and L3 switching, cloud-based. They definitely don't have something like PBA that can automate their connections. There's quite a bit of differences between this switch and the other switches. And let's see, I'm trying to think through the switches I'm aware of. I don't think any of them provide Cambium Sync. So if you're plugging in a radio that requires Cambium Sync, then you got to use a separate sync source. If you want to use that switch, you also have to use a separate individual sync source. If you're using a radio that doesn't need Cambium Sync, well, then you can do it, but there is that limitation as well. Okay, scrolling down through the questions here. Oh, someone said my voice was fading. I apologize for that. Hopefully you could hear me most of the time. Yes, so multi-gig or multi-rate Ethernet. We do have a switch. It's the EX2016M-P. We do support multi-gig on that switch, and it's an interesting switch. Fully featured, fully functional, and we were able to do it at a pretty good price. So we went with a hybrid solution. So we have some standard 1 gig ports, and then we have some high profile that can support up to 2.5 gig. Now on those 2.5 gig ports, we've done something special. We don't support the basic standard 30 watts. We do support 4-pair PoE BT power. So on that switch, we support up to 60 watts. So 2.5 gig, and we support 60 watts. So some of these high-end APs, they need more than the 30 watts that is typical. So we support 60. Also, if you want to plug in any high-end video surveillance camera that requires more than 30 watts, we have it on that switch as well. So very functional, priced very okay, when will full cnMatrix configuration support be coming? So we do not support 100% of our features on cnMaestro, but I do feel like, we've hit the 80-20 rule. So, 80% of our customers out there has everything they need. For the 20% that is using a feature that we do not expose on cnMaestro, for those customers, they can still use our COI snippets or COI overrides functionality that is available, and that's new, and it's available in this 4.0 release. But also we are constantly adding more and more, exposing more and more features on cnMaestro as well. So with each feature, with each release, we're adding more support for cnMaestro. But it's pretty comprehensive right now. Okay, the next question is an excellent question. So the purple ports, and I don't know what color to call that, pink or whatever, but I like purple. So the purple ports are not BT, and actually that's not true, and that's why it's a little bit confusing. People associate BT with getting more than 30 watts, like 60 watts or 90 watts. BT actually refers to just the next standard, and that standard allows you, so implementing that next version of the protocol. Once you implement it, you can claim to be BT compatible, but it doesn't mean that you support 60 or 90 watts. We do, right? On our ports 1 through 8, we do. On ports 9 through 16, we're BT compliant, but it's 2-pair PoE, so we only can classify and support devices that up to 30 watts, and I forget what class that is, class 4, class 5 or something. But it technically it's BT, but I think the essence of your question is correct, right? On ports 9 through 16, we only support up to 30 watts, even though it's standards based using BT, AF, AT, or BT. We support up to 30 watts, either through the standard or through passive. Next question, 1200 watt supply has the same part number for both the 110 and, oh no, it's not a typo, it is the same power supply. It's really up to you. So you can either connect it up to a 110 source, or you can connect it up to a 220 source. That's your choice. It is the same power supply. Okay, could support 670, 650? The answer is yes. And we definitely have done that. That is actually at one of our beta sites. Can we replace the CMM5 controller injector with 4 450Ms? The answer is yes, and that is what the switch is designed for. That's exactly what the switch is designed for. And it's okay for me to mention that, when this switch starts shipping, you can get a TX switch for a lower price than the CMM5, and it does a heck of a lot more. So yes, there's nothing that the CMM5 can do that this switch cannot do. Next question. Will we'll have you any cnMatrix models that will support the 2.5 gig. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you very much. And this is a repeat of the previous question. So the answer is yes, and that switch is the EX2016M-P. Now, specifically on our WISP switches, the answer is no. I'm sorry, not in these first 3 versions. We do not support 2.5 gig. Could the switch support passive PoE from other vendors? Yeah, you can plug in any device you want into our switch. Third-party devices, we prefer that you plug in Cambium devices, but no, you can plug any device you want into this switch. If it takes passive PoE, we can power it up. The question may be a little bit confusing. You give me examples of other switch providers, that Ubiquity, Mimosa, and Microtech. You cannot power up our switch with PoE, if that's the meaning, because there would be no way that would give us enough PoE power budget. So, you know, we're offering 400 watts, 500 watts, 600, you know, we can't get that over PoE from another device. So power in to our switch is through the CRPS power supplies only. Power out, yeah, we provide passive PoE out, and we can power up any device that you like. I think that's the last question. It is the last question. Okay, well, hopefully my audio worked okay for everybody, most of the time anyway. Please reach out to your local Cambium connection and ask them any further questions, and you can set up a meeting with me if you'd like. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time.